So as you finish up this process, you also need to come up with timelines on how, maybe let's say you've agreed on the targets, you've reviewed, you've had this conversation. So come up with timelines on when next are you going to meet again to review the performance, to see if there's improvement, or to see how the employee is progressing based on the targets that you've discussed. So come up with a timeline that you're going to have the review, and come up with also how you're going to constantly follow up to ensure that the employee is on track. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're here for the first time, my name is Nelly, and on this channel I share content on professional and personal growth topics. I also share content on workplace conversations, and most importantly to help you improve the quality of your life. So in today's video, I want to have a conversation on how you can carry out a successful performance review. This probably is the time of the year that most companies are conducting performance reviews, and it is important that you understand how to carry out this process correctly so you're able to attain the desired result. So just to get started, I would like to, in this video, I'm going to walk you through a step-by-step guide on how you can carry out a successful performance review, and especially if you're a manager, just to know the do's and don'ts. How do you hold this conversation? How do you plan for this conversation? What is required so you're able to help your employees achieve the best, and you're able to also help your employees feel appreciated and valued. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So my first tip on how you can hold a successful performance review as a line manager is on first learning and training yourself on this process. So why this is important to equip yourself with the knowledge that is required to carry out a successful review is to help you avoid any errors that may make this process unsuccessful. And maybe you're asking the question of how then can you learn, or where can you learn? There are so many tutorials online that you can make good use of to equip yourself with the knowledge that is required for a successful performance review, from knowing how to engage the employee during the review, what type of questions to ask, what time, the timing, and of course just a general information about conducting successful performance reviews. Tip number 2, after you've equipped yourself with the required knowledge, is you need to prepare. So before conducting a performance review, because performance reviews can sometimes be very emotive conversation. So as a line manager, you need to prepare, and you also need to prepare the employee. So how you can prepare is, number one, coming up with the right questions that you're going to ask in that review. Being emotionally stable. As I already said, these conversations can sometimes be very emotive, because you don't want to get into a review and begin shouting to the employee, because not all the time you're going to go into a review where the employee has performed well. What if the employee has not achieved or has not attained the targets? You don't want to get into a conversation where you're going to use words that demean the employee. So that hugely you'll take care of that in the part of preparation. You prepare with the right questions, be emotionally stable, understand the employee, and also understand your capability. Are you ready? Are you equipped to carry out a performance review? The next tip is to communicate about the review to the employee on time. So it all still narrows down to preparing the employee. So one way you can do this is communicating, like booking an employee's calendar, let's say 2 weeks or maybe a week before, so the employee is physically and is psychologically prepared to have the performance review conversations. So you can come up with a questionnaire, and of course I did a video on the best questions that you can ask during the best questions that you can have in a performance review questionnaire. So you come up with the right questions, you send them to the employee early, and also book their calendar so they are prepared. So this will help the employee to first feel part and parcel of the process. It will also help the employee to prepare better. They shall have answered and at least know the questions that are going to be asked during this process, so that it doesn't come as a surprise. So it's very important to prepare so you're able to hold a successful performance review. The next step is to create a non-threatening environment. A conducive environment is everything when it comes to the success of a performance review discussion. So one of the reasons you need to create a non-threatening environment is it will help the employee to be able to speak, and it will also help the employee and even yourself to be very comfortable to have that conversation, because there could be some things that the employee has been going through, especially when performance is not up to the required standards, that might have contributed to that maybe dismal or that substandard type of performance. But if you create an environment that they're not able to talk, or an environment that is not conducive, then they will honestly not open up. So also when you're creating a conducive environment, this means that you'll want to be in an environment where there will not be interruptions. Like, let's say you start having this conversation and maybe a few minutes into the session, someone is calling you, or someone is opening the door, or things like such types of interruption. So then what can you do? One thing you can do is that when within the workplace the environment is not conducive, then you should be able to even get an external environment. You can go outside the office, as long as you're going to get a conducive environment. If you're having a virtual session, if you're carrying out this performance review session virtually, then you have to ensure that you're in a background that is free from any type of distraction, free from noise, free from any maybe like music, and maybe you note where someone is going to walk into that room to interrupt during the session. Then also when you're starting this, when you're creating this conducive environment, you can start with an informal chat. Maybe ask the employee how is their family, because mostly you find when people are going for reviews, the performance reviews, there can be anxiety, and this can be both from the side of the line manager and the employee. So even you are creating that informal space, maybe asking them how is their family, or something that is not related to work. Of course, also bearing in mind that this is a highly professional and formal process. So by so doing, you're able to also ease your anxiety, ease the employee, and just get into an environment where the employee will find it very easy to speak, which I really put a lot of emphasis in, that they should be able to feel that the environment is conducive enough for them to speak, to share their views boldly, whether negative or positive. The next tip is, as you start the conversation, start with the positive part or the positive feedback. So why this is important? Because everyone would like to be appreciated and everyone would like to feel valued. So in an instance where the employee has not performed to the expected standards, it might be that they've not really achieved some of the targets, but there are some that they've achieved. So it is important to begin by recognizing the fact that even though they've not met to this expected percentage, but there are those things that they've done well and you really recognize them. So starting by appreciating employees also helps to create a positive environment, and it is in this positive environment that is going to ensure that you have a successful conversation. Imagine imagine walking into a room where you're going to conduct a performance review, and you begin by maybe quarreling, telling employee how they've not added value. Even some people go quite unprofessional to even mentioning that you've been paying them for free, and so on and so forth. So such negative statements will kill the morale automatically, build an attitude inside that room, and for sure it will just result or birth an emotive conversation that will not help you achieve the objectives of that review. So also mentioning the achievement, what it is, if there's a project that you'd given them that you felt they did well, because honestly, even if someone has really not done well, but there's always something, there's always one strength that you really identify that that employee has. So as if you want to open this conversation strong, then focus on that positive achievement, or that one thing you like about the employee. The next tip is to align the conversation with the employee scorecard and the job description. So at the end of the day, what you're reviewing or what you're appraising is what was in the employee scorecard, which are the KPIs. So you need to look at each and every key performance indicator that you'd laid down for the employee. And of course, we assume that from the start it was very clear, and that's why I always insist that at the point of performance contracting, it needs to be very clear on what is it that you're going to measure after. So you need to align the conversation to the KPIs and to the scorecard of the employee, because it's only fair if you're reviewing someone based on what you'd agree that they will receive. I've had and I've seen people complain that during their performance review, they even felt that they were not being reviewed on what is on their scorecard or what is on their JD. So then that automatically sets up someone for failure. So it's important that as you do the review, you focus on the KPIs that were in the employee scorecard and the expected deliverables as clearly outlined in their job description. The next tip is to be clear and specific on the feedback. So after you've reviewed the KPIs, let's say maybe a scorecard has like 4 pillars, or the 4 key objectives. So you review each and every one of them and give specific feedback on each. So for instance, if you'd say that they needed to maybe achieve a sales target of 25%, that probably under the scorecard will fall under financials. So you review that and see how have they performed in that KPI. So if there's in each and every KPI, whatever it is that they've done, you need to be very honest and give what your observation has been like per KPI. How do you think, or how have you observed they performed? If it was the KPI maybe under financials, under maybe like improving processes, under customer satisfaction, how has they performed in each? So at that point, you need to give specific feedback per each and every KPI. Avoid vague statements. Avoid general statements. You need to be very specific when you're giving feedback in each and every KPI within the employee scorecard. The next step is to allow the employee to come up. They need to come up with a solution and tell you how they are going to achieve that. So the reason you need to allow them, after you've had the conversation, of course you've pointed area that they did well, and you've also pointed out that the areas that were not well done. So then you need to allow the employee to come up with a solution on how they are going to maybe bridge the gap or how they are going to improve their performance. So the reason you need to let the employee come up with their own solution is the employee understands the challenges that they were facing. The employee understands their ability and their capability and their competencies. And by also letting an employee come up with the solutions is a way to help them own and become accountable. So then the next review period, they'll be able to really, even if they don't meet the target, it will be very clear that these are the targets that you set for yourself. So allow them come up with their own solutions, how they want to forge their way forward to improving the performance. But your role in this as the line manager, of course, is to, in each and every step or in whatever solution they tell you, you need to ensure that you're able to provide support. And you're able to provide support to help them achieve that goal, or to help them find that solution. The next step, after you've reviewed, they've come up with the solution, so you need to come up with new goals. Of course, in most cases, you may have to carry forward the targets that they've not been able to achieve or increase them. So you need to come up with new targets together with the employee. So the goal setting process in this case, or the way forward process, should also involve you as the line manager. So come up with a new target and involve the employee and ensure that the employee agree with them. So how the employee agree with them is probably by signing, maybe coming up with the goals and signing them together. So if they come up with these goals, also the same way, if they come up with their solution, they are able to own that process. They are able to own up the process, and they are able to, it brings in the aspect of accountability. And one thing to remember, that is going to be my next tip. One thing to remember is always to keep this process very, very formal. It's a formal process, even though when you are starting, you say you need to make it a bit easy when starting so the employee gets to relax. You need to ensure you're keeping respectful and professional language all through the conversation. Don't use words that will make the employee feel demeaned or disrespected. As you're having this conversation, you need to watch your language. You need to practice active listening, not just listening to speak, but listening to understand what really the employee is saying. Another important tip is allow session for feedback, because a performance review genuinely is a two-way traffic. As you review the employee, they will also be reviewing you, because in the performance of the employee, there's also a role that a line manager plays. And probably if the employee doesn't do well, to some extent, it might reflect that you've also not done your job as a line manager in terms of offering the support that is required. So allow time for feedback, so the employee is able to share their feedback, and even more specifically to tell you the areas that maybe you've not supported, the areas you've done well as a line manager. So have a conversational feedback session where the employee is able to share feedback that will even also help you to understand how the employee wants to be led, or how the employee wants to be handled. And also if you've contributed into their high performance, if they performed well, or if you've contributed negatively to their low performance by maybe how you handle them. Maybe you're the type of manager that you do not give very clear tasks. The tasks are not very clear, so the employee is often left flowing, not knowing what exactly to do. The next tip is to close strong. So how do you close strong? You've had this interesting conversation. So as you close strong, one of the things you need to do is to reassure the employee that you're available to support. You are going to walk the journey with them, and you're going to be there always to support them. Your support could come in terms of maybe training. You've identified the gaps that the employee have. Your support could come maybe in the bit of coaching, giving the employee more challenging targets, especially if you've realized they're a super performer, so they don't feel underutilized. So you need to re-emphasize your support. As you close strong, you also need to re-emphasize the company values, the value of that role, and you need to let the employee know that irrespective of the level where they are, that role contributes positively to the general objective or the general goal of the organization. So closing strong helps you helps the employee also to walk out of that conversation feeling valued, feeling heard, feeling helped. So as a line manager, you need to master this tip to be able to close strong. And guys, the final tip for this video is to follow up. So as you finish up this process, you also need to come up with timelines on how, maybe let's say you've agreed on the targets, you've reviewed, you've had this conversation. So come up with timelines on when next are you going to meet again to review the performance, to see if there's improvement, or to see how the employee is progressing based on the targets that you've discussed. So come up with a timeline that you're going to have the review, and come up with also how you're going to constantly follow up to ensure that the employee is on track. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope this video was relatable. And if you've not subscribed to this channel, this could be a good time for you to join this community where we are all about learning and making and positioning ourselves for those better jobs that we want. As always, please share the topics that you want me to talk about in my next video in the comment section. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.